Okay, I call the meeting to order, and happy Thursday morning to everyone. I'm welcoming, welcome to this meeting. It's number 40 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Science and Research. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of June 23rd, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and are also remote using the Zoom application. A special welcome to Sebastien Lemaire from the Bloc, who's joining us this morning as a sub. It's always good to see you in the room. We are going to be continuing our study for the support of commercialization of intellectual property. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of our witnesses and for the members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have a choice at the bottom of your screen to choose either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select your desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Again, for the members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand, and for members on Zoom, please raise your hand using the raise hand function, and the clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can. So we appreciate your patience, and we'll try and keep our eye on the members that are on Zoom. In accordance with our routine motion, I'm informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting, and thank you to our interpreters for helping us through all of that. So now I'd like to welcome our witnesses.
Point of order?
We have a point of order before we welcome let me welcome our witnesses, and then I'll take a point of order if you're okay on that. Thanks. We have three witnesses this morning, or three groups being represented. We have, as an individual, Neil Desai, Senior Fellow, Center for International Governance and Innovation. Also, as an individual, we have Anne-Marie LaRose, former President and Chief Executive Officer of Eligo Innovation. And we have two people from Copybec, Christian Laforce, the Executive Director, and Gilles Herman, who is the Vice Chair. And now we have a point of order from Mr. Mazier, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still waiting responses from the University of British Columbia from March 21st and the University of Calgary in reference to revenue licensing for intellectual property and the percentage of intellectual property. So okay. I don't know, I guess inform the community. I don't know how to get that. We would like by by the weekend. And the department as well, on March 23rd, we asked for tracking on patent data and then data from Technology Transfer Office.
Great.
And that's from March 23rd. So could we get that by the end of the week? Or how does this
We'll make the request to the clerk and see what we can do. And thanks for giving us the reminder. I know the analysts are preparing reports in the background, and we want to make sure we have all the information available that we're expecting. So the clerk will check into that for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we have three opening statements coming to us, 5 minutes each, and we'll start off with Neil Desai, please.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the invitation. You've already heard from the Chair of the Council of Canadian Innovators and the CEO of the Innovation Asset Collective, organizations I'm affiliated with, so I'll aim to make my comments additive. It's worth framing our discussion by stating that we're in an important juncture for Canada's economy vis-a-vis the global economy. Canada's competitiveness has dwindled for multiple generations, while our cumulative public investments in quote-unquote innovation are among the highest in the OECD. It'd be easy to chalk these results up to inferior researchers and entrepreneurs or a culture of complacency, but these would be gross oversimplifications. I'm a firm believer that we must understand and evaluate the incentive structures if we're truly to tackle this matter that's so important to maintaining Canada's standard of living. Canada's innovation economic incentive structures, largely driven by our public investments, have not been focused on commercializing Canadian inventions by Canadian headquartered companies to the benefit of all Canadians. Let's look at some of the largest innovation investments Canadian taxpayers make. Our university research granting councils, the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Credit, the Industrial Research and Development Program. These multi-billion-dollar annual investments are highly focused on discovery, research, and development. We also have to counter subsidies to our universities and colleges, as talent is so fundamental to development of new technologies and growing innovative companies. These investments and our other vast public innovation investments have led to incredible scientific discoveries and technologies. However, the widespread economic benefits to Canadians haven't resulted, and I ask us why. Again, I point to the structural considerations. Their program guidelines do not enable commercialization activities such as intellectual property strategies, demonstration pilots, clinical trials, or global sales and marketing activities. An innovation ecosystem that focuses so heavily on the upstream investments in R&D without back-end commercialization focus from Canada, that is also an open economy to foreign direct investment, is ripe to have those investments leak out to the benefit of foreign firms and jurisdictions. While I'm supportive of an open economy, I have to question the logic in our public sector using taxpayer dollars to attract FDI in Canada's tech sector without ensuring those foreign investments will lead to commercialization activities from Canada that will contribute to our bottom line. For those Canadian firms that still choose to commercialize their inventions from Canada, we have to also consider the structural barriers to scaling. I would especially highlight tax disincentives to scaling Canadian technology companies. For example, the jump from small business taxes to corporate tax rates, personal tax rates, and the taxation of stock options, an important long-term incentive tool used by growth companies. Beyond these general considerations, I would have you consider some of the subsector specific challenges and opportunities. In my sector, cybersecurity, leading jurisdictions realize that a growing domestic industry is not only a driver of prosperity, it's also integral to the security and sovereignty of their citizens and country. As such, they get to know their innovative firms intimately and in a structured fashion. They leverage non-tariff barriers like national security considerations to ensure their domestic firms understand the acute threat landscape. They leverage their procurement regime strategically to co-develop solutions with their vetted companies to address the challenges domestically that can subsequently be exported. And they do this in a fashion that's compliant with their international trade obligations. I believe we learned through the pandemic that domestic capacity, both on R&D and commercialization in strategic sectors like vaccines, drives security, sovereignty, and prosperity concurrently. But this takes foresight, meaningful public-private engagement, and leveraging public resources in a strategic fashion. I believe Canada's cumulative public investments in innovation are sufficient to achieve this. The structures need to be aligned to incentivize Canadian companies investing heavily in R&D to start, scale, and operate from Canada. I thank you for the opportunity and look forward to unpacking these remarks and drilling down into specific recommendations through our conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Desai. And now we'll move to Anne-Marie LaRose, former president and CEO of Aligo Innovation.
Hello, everyone. Members of the Standing Committee on Science and Research. I'm delighted to meet with you this morning to discuss a sector and a topic that I'm passionate about and which I have been concretely active for the past 20 years, namely supporting the commercialization of IP from public research. And indeed, I was president and CEO of Aligo Innovation from 2014 to 2021, on one of the three companies involved in the commercialization of public university research that existed in Quebec before the creation of Alexis. Aligo was owned by 10 of the 18 universities in Quebec. Also, I submitted co-wrote a briefing, and we were looking at research in Quebec based on the successful merger of two of the four valorization companies in Quebec through the creation of Aligo, and in a context where the universities and Quebec government had initiated reflections to review the model of valorization of university research in Quebec. This morning, I'd like to talk to you more specifically about the commercialization of royalty-free IP, also known as orphan IP. By royalty-free, we mean that IP is not subject to commercial rights granted to companies, which is generally the case when research is funded or co-funded by private partners. In this situation, the commercial development partner is already present. In this brief speech, I would also like to highlight some of the issues, barriers, and success factors for maximizing the socioeconomic benefits of IP. First, technology transfer process is long and complex. It requires a long-term vision and actions, and it requires patience and means that universities don't necessarily have. You also have to remember that about 10 to 15% of invention declarations will be valorized by transfer of IP. It can take 7 to 10 years between an invention declaration and the first royalties from a transfer. For example, Stanford, the example speaks for itself. With 500 invention disclosures per year, it took them almost 20 years to see their royalty income increase substantially and reach a certain point where income becomes more important than expenses. Stanford is now self-funding with its revenues, thanks in part to a few successes like Google, although less than 1% of its licensing agreements are profitable. My second point is about the need to make business decisions at all stages of the transfer process. This means that we need a dedicated and seasoned team with multi-sector abilities that are agile and with collective intelligence to evaluate and execute commercialization plans proactively in independence and with the ability to make the right business decisions. My third point is about the need to reduce technological and risks and innovation business, which are generally at very early stages, to be able to attract strategic partners. This also means that aside from funding patent requests, we also have to have a team in place with the ability for internal financing to take the risk away from these technologies. We have to dissociate this commercialization ability with other forms of transfer, including open and collaborative research, because these are activities with different dynamics and orientations. We also have to support research and research infrastructure. Universities generally tend to focus on activities that generate short and medium-term income. IP commercialization is also generally an expense for them. So technological transfer and IP have to be treated as an asset with an economic value, and it has to be really, the social economic aspects have to be the objective. The objective shouldn't be to fund research, but rather to create new products and new services. These decisions have to be based on commercial and business imperatives, and the dynamic shouldn't be focused on the needs of universities, but rather on getting this good to market. In conclusion, since IP commercialization developed by public funds is really intended to create social and economic wealth, it would be wise for the government to directly support these services and expect a return in exchange. I'd like to thank you for your attention. I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony on time. And finally, we have a representative from Copybeck for 5 minutes. Christian Lafourse, are you up? Or will it be?
Oui, bonjour.
Good morning. Thank you for having us appear before the committee today. I am the General Manager of Septentrion Editions and the Vice Chair of Copybeck. I'm accompanied by Mr. Christian Lafourse, our Executive Director. Section 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights enshrines copyright. However, it's tricky to find a balance between access to knowledge and the respect of the work of those who have produced it. It's not a trivial exercise. Freedom of expression can only exist when authors are able to live from their work. In some fragile democracies, creating and developing copyright management companies is a lever to ensure political stability. A collective management company is a non-profit organization in charge of administering the rights that have been entrusted to it, collecting royalties according to different established models, and redistributing these funds to rights holders. Copybeck is the Quebec Copyright Management Company for the written word, representing authors, publishers, publishing houses, journalists, newspapers, magazines, and visual artists. Copybeck also has agreements with more than 30 foreign management companies, thus ensuring reciprocal protection of works in all of these territories. The copyright system is the cornerstone that has allowed for more than 2 centuries the development of this economic sector. Today, Canadian publishers generate GDP of approximately $750 million and employ nearly 10,000 people. The copyright system allows creators to make a living from their work and publishers to find new outlets for the works they represent. For example, in 2018-2019, the export market for Canadian titles was worth nearly $100 million, including $700 million in rights sales alone. Copyright is also a driver of social development. People have the right to access to works that are relevant to them. Students, through their schooling, have the right to have access to works that refer to their immediate environment. But for this to happen, creators must be able to make a living from this. The world of education has always been a large consumer of cultural and intellectual content. It is intrinsically linked to the development of the written word. As access to education has improved, the needs of the educational community have increased, thus allowing more creators to make a living from their work, partially through the royalties paid to them by copyright management companies. In 2012, when the Copyright Act was modernized, legislators added several exceptions to circumvent IP, including the introduction of the notion of fair use for educational purposes. However, without specifying the limits of its application. Since this time, educational institutions have massively disengaged from the copyright regime. The financial losses directly attributable to this gaping hole in our legislation, around $200 million over 10 years, threaten the entire sector and its healthy economic development. What entrepreneur, Canadian or foreign, would want to invest in a field where one of the main markets is no longer legally protected, even though most of our economic partners have such legal protection? The damage caused by Canadian copyright law is a concern for many countries, and international stakeholders have repeatedly criticized it. In their mandate letters, both the Minister of Canadian Heritage and the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry were given the mandate to correct this inequity. The 2022 federal budget even referred to the government's commitment to ensuring fair compensation for creators and copyright holders. Yet, nothing has changed. The Canadian government is knowingly negligent in this matter. It is time to take strong and courageous action and put an end to this injustice. We need to change the legislative framework to promote the copyright commercialization, ensure the future of the book and publishing industry, and at the same time protect Canadian culture. Thank you for listening, and we are very happy to answer your questions.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you very much.
We're going to move to our first round of 6 minutes each, starting with Ryan Williams. Mr. Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. To Ms. LaRose, I was really interested in your comments about orphan IP. And, you know, we all know in this committee we can't commercialize something that we don't own. How much orphan IP is in Canada, and how do we help make that orphan IP non-orphan IP?
That's an excellent question. In reality, in Quebec, for example, there are more than $2.5 billion invested in research, mainly through public funding. And most of these IP declarations that are generated are considered orphan IP. This means it was developed by public funding without the presence of a commercial partner necessarily, and that's how we defined orphan IP. What this means that there's a different process. Partners aren't identified, so we have to go seek the right partner, or in many cases, it's roughly 50-50 in Quebec. There'll be a dedicated company created to be able to commercialize the orphan IP if it does deserve such a thing. And then in the other half of cases, it'll be transferred to other companies to be able to make it more competitive. So I don't have any specific figures with respect to the number of IP cases, orphan IP cases in Quebec. Roughly in Quebec, there are 500 invention declarations that are made per year throughout Quebec universities, and in the large majority of cases, more than 50%, I'd say, but I can't put a figure to it, it is orphan IP. I hope I answered your question sufficiently. Thank you very much.
How do we help in general then intellectual property holders find partners? I think this is probably the hardest position. It's almost like matchmaking, so a bit of forming a good relationship or a great partner. What recommendations can you make based on your knowledge on how we can help intellectual property holders find a partner with interested businesses to commercialize and vice versa?
That's another excellent question. There are universities in Canada with different structures, and either within these universities or outside of them, there is a company that does this work. I was the head of such a company for 8 years who had such a mandate. They evaluated first the relevancy of the IP in question. Should it be transferred into a technology? And then we just have to be proactive. So we can identify partners in Quebec and in Canada, or even internationally, that will see an edge by acquiring this IP. So this type of work does take a critical mass of ability in-house. Sometimes we don't have enough resources in Quebec, but when you regroup this intellectual property, it does often increase the value of it. And you have to be proactive. You have to establish a plan to increase the value of it and make a decision throughout this process. At the beginning, if you think that there is commercial interest and that there could be a partner identified, you have to be able to go through the process and abandon it if you don't find a partner, if they don't see the commercial Of course, the services we offer are when users go to various universities and colleges and want to use our publications and our catalog. We redistribute the amounts that are paid to the authors. We have another mechanism as well, services for rights holders, and in terms of signing contracts with the main users. There are also other departments as well of higher education involved. So we collect data, we redistribute funds from the various titles we hold.
Si vous me permettez,
If I could, I'd like to specify in very concrete terms when an extract or a work is used. In any case, the license that Quebec offers allows the person to use the work or the extract from it legally in exchange for financial compensation. Therefore, we do this collectively, and we redistribute this money directly to the rights holders, who are the users and the authors.
Okay, next question. Can you describe your collective management approach and how does it support the content creative and copyright holders?
ok,
Of course, the income from rights holders, whether it's book editors or newspaper publishers, so they come from either the sale of the end product or subscriptions for newspapers. There's also works that are used in different contexts. The funds that Quebec or other Canadian entities give to the rights holders are a large portion of the income that these people receive, and it allows them to create a national market for works that reflect people who want to access them. It allows us to create within the domestic market an export market as well. We're not just talking about fiction, works of fiction, poetry and things like that. We're also talking about newspapers, science and admin, economic manuals, anything that involves intellectual creation that can be in a text can be subject to rights, and it's really important for creators. And publishers sell these rights. There's also translations, cinema rights, audio, video, anything you could imagine.
Thank you. Ms. LaRose, I was wondering if you could elaborate how Aligo Innovation enhances the IP assets of the 10 Quebec universities and their affiliated hospitals and research centers.
First, Aligo stopped its activities in 2021. So in Quebec right now, there is only one enhancement company that houses the assets of the three companies that were in place before. So my team at Aligo is now at Excelis. There's a very excellent team in place. I can't speak about the business model of Excelis, but I can talk about how we used to work at Aligo. Clearly, every file that we received in terms of enhancement and invention declarations had to have a strategy established, and efforts had to be made proactively to identify partners. One of the challenges, well, there are many, but one of them that I mentioned was there was a lack of maturity in terms of business and technological patents from universities. So it was a considerable hindrance. And one of the things we sought was that we had an internal funding budget that allowed us to do some validations. If we had an interested business partner in IP, or if there was a startup that had to convince an investor, we did have some funding to be able to fund some proof of concepts or activities. So you can't wait to have a contract with a university and then find an answer 6 or 12 months later. You really have to be in a business dynamic. That's what we did at Lego, and that's what's continuing now with a somewhat different. The floor is yours. 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much to be at the committee today. I supported the debate when we talked about these topics. I'm sad to see it go from the industry committee, but there is a key issue that was about Quebec and copyright. It was studied at industry committee not too long ago, but I also participated in similar studies at Canadian Heritage that produced excellent reports in 2019. And one of the recommendations, recommendation 8T, was for the government to table legislation right away. Well, I'll go back to that later. To amend the Copyright Act so that we have provisions with respect to fair use of IP and exceptions for the education system. Can you talk about the importance of amending this legislation for your industry? I will begin and Gilles could continue. What happens with this legislation is that we're allowing no free use, and artists and authors do not receive funding for their books. And any use that people or universities do, since there are no limits, they can take the whole book and justify it by saying that it's fair use for the needs in class. So there is no compensation paid to the authors, and it creates a loss of revenue for those who publish it, and this has been the case for more than 10 years. And with this loss in revenue, it means that when the money is paid, it's not reinvested to cover other authors and publishers. It really weakens the Canadian market. And as a result, I would imagine it has an enormous impact on the will to be able to publish for authors. And you talked about negligence in your opening statements. Is the government really hearing your call? Why is it taking so long for concrete action to be taken to protect these copyright? Yes, it's a very long process, and in 2012, the Act was amended after many meetings were held, and they heard from the education sector that was saying that they wouldn't affect the payments of rights to rights holders, but then there was a 5-year period set out to amend the new legislation. We started work, but nothing still hasn't happened. Both at Industry and Innovation and Canadian Heritage Committees, there were 2 very good reports today. What affects this industry in Canada? We're talking about 2 billion books sold in Canada every year. This industry is in crisis because the education market is weakening. We're talking about millions of losses every year, and this has never been offset. So the risk is that tomorrow the education sector will no longer have Canadian content taught because Canadian publishers will have disappeared, and we will leave this space for U.S., English, and French publishers to take over. which is quite scandalous in my view. Ask this question to Mr. Champagne, who has the ability to make legislative changes, and how come he hasn't taken action? We're always wondering. Yes, you know that I sent a letter in October to Mr. Champagne, and I asked questions at the industry committee talking about legislation to support copyrights. He said it's important, and he would work with Mr. Rodriguez, and he heard what the industry has said, and he's heard what the universities have said, and he said it was a priority, etc., etc. But for me, one of the issues is also the viewpoint of universities. How come they consider this as an expense? I'm having a hard time seeing how come they do not look at the whole issue of copyright, because we're increasing knowledge by paying creators. How come universities are so refractory to such a measure? It's essentially an economic and financial issue for universities. They're making savings on the backs of creators. Copyrights are respected in other countries, but in Canada, we're talking about Canada outside of Quebec. In Quebec, the provincial government has always supported copyright legislation, and they do continue to pay their rights. But outside of Quebec, such royalties have disappeared, and we're wondering how come universities, if they want to enhance intellectual creation, how can they support this? Because they have research arms that support innovation, and they should be enhancing this. It's a question of increasing. Thank you.
Sefa. Now for Richard Cannings for 6 minutes on the end of this round.
Okay, well, thank you to the witnesses for being here. This has been very interesting, and I'd like to follow up with Copybec on that testimony. I'm an author myself, and I get payments every year from Access Copyright. So my first question is, how are you related to Access Copyright? Are you the Quebec version of that? Is Access Copyright more the Anglophone community of authors and producers?
It's more a question of territory. We represent Quebec authors, and we have a reciprocal agreement with Access Copyright that serves the rest of Canada.
Thank you, I'm so glad that we are talking about copyright here, because it is an issue of IP. Certainly, that's more. I have had more experience in this realm because, like you were saying, I've seen my copyright payments really slashed over the last few years. And fortunately for myself, I never have written books to make a living, but I know friends of mine, constituents of mine, do depend on those payments to make a living, and it has been very difficult. And I'm just wondering if you could perhaps, first of all, I'd just like to get a clarification on what you said about Quebec. From what I understood from your last statements, the Quebec government has stepped up to pay Quebec authors these copyright payments, but outside Quebec, that's where we've seen the losses?
Oui, ben écoutez,
Yes, I'm happy to know that you are also an author and that you get royalties from what you write. But if one of your works or an extract from it was used at a university in Quebec via our partner, you would receive a royalty. But if your work was used in a Canadian university, you would not receive probably a royalty. But what's particular in Quebec is that the government of Quebec voted on a unanimous motion to defend copyrights. So with respect to licenses and educational institutions in Quebec, there's a kind of a mindset that means that they cannot fully remove themselves from copyrights, but royalties have been halved over 10 years. And we still feel this pressure because these educational institutions look at the rest of Canada and they say, well, perhaps we should also do the same thing and make some savings in this area. It's only a question of time because there's federal legislation. And right now, we're supporting this in Quebec with different legislation, but they could just step away from it like the rest of Canada is doing.
And again, I just heard some mention in your testimony just before I began about what was going on in the rest of the world. How do other countries handle copyright in terms of universities, colleges, grade schools using materials? Is there this same issue there, or are those copyright funds sent out more thoroughly?
L'image du Canada.
Canada's image internationally has been very tarnished with respect to copyrights. When we talk about this, it's very negative. Yesterday, I participated in a roundtable with the international director of Editors Association, and I asked him, what do you think about copyrights worldwide today? It shouldn't be like it is in Canada, he said, just to give you an idea of what our partners think about us with respect to copyrights. There are collective management companies. The education sector is one of the main users of content, and funding comes from them. And in Canada today is really a black sheep in this area, to such an extent that many publishers have withdrawn from the Canadian market. They said, I will no longer do business with Canada because they're not respecting our rights. And one of the latest publishers in France has said the same thing because of the current situation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kennington. Mr. Lemaire, I do feel like I'm back in industry committee with you. We've had these conversations. Over to Mr. Soroka, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for coming today. I'd like to start off with Ms. LaRose. You had mentioned that Stanford University is now self-funded because of the royalties that they're receiving, even though it took like 20 years. Are other universities able to do this, or was that just an anomaly?
That's a very good question. There are transfer technology activities that have been taking place for 40 years, and this has been happening for quite a while. So yes, you have to be patient to be able to do IP transfer for IP that is orphan. It's a long process. So you have to understand that Stanford, they have a critical mass of files. They have 500 invention declarations per year. We have the same amount for all universities in Quebec. So that's one point that's important to bear in mind. Another thing, a statistics that's interesting with Stanford is that 1% of files bring sizable revenue, and perhaps 2 to 5 are only in the thousands. So there are over 500 declarations in Quebec. Well, the point is these statistics are kind of the same everywhere, whether it's France or Belgium or other groups. We almost have the same statistics with respect to the impacts and royalties. Because of critical mass and the volume of files, and also the massive expertise they have at Stanford, it allows them to transfer these technologies.
Yeah, I've only got 5 minutes. I'm sorry to interrupt there, but I see there's other factors to consider as well, so thank you for that. I guess I'll go to Mr. Desai first before I run out of time. My colleague Ryan Williams asked you a question about tax changes, other tax changes. Could you please send in writing more information if you have to share with us, please?
I'd be happy to do that.
Question to you, sir, is the fact that you said there's several failures within the structure that we are producing right now to get IT or commercialization of IP. Could you please give us examples of where the failures are and how we could make these improvements?
Absolutely, and I think you have to go to the first principle. What's the general unit to successfully commercialize IP? I think we've spent a lot of this discussion today on universities, and I think they're extremely good generators of ideas that become intellectual property. But to see commercial success in a lot of the examples that have been given here, the basic unit is a company. And I worry that our system doesn't incentivize the researchers actually creating companies. We gave the Stanford example previously. There are streams for researchers to take without having to leave the academic institution, opportunities to create companies. And that's how you get virtuous feedback loops over a span of 40 years. So these structural points I'm making, you can see them along the way. They're hyper technical, but they're obvious at the same time. There's disincentives today to commercializing IP from the university. If you step away from your research bench, you can lose your research grant, your opportunity to go get tenure. There's structural barriers in the academic system. I mentioned tax as one on the growth of the company, but I think we can even go further upstream on why folks choose not to even try to commercialize their IP. And we have so much IP just sitting out there being gobbled up by foreign entities, or just sitting on shelves because people don't know about them, like companies like mine.
So would you say then these companies aren't even worried about the universities trying to patent or do contracts with them because the universities have such stringent regulations that they'll work with companies such as Huawei, and then they're not even worried about having to patent this, that there's potential of national security risk with working with companies like this if the regulations aren't changed?
20 seconds.
So I think, so I would look at size of company and source country of those types of companies, or the beneficial ownership of those. Again, 20 seconds isn't enough time to get into that. I'm happy to table some content on that. But I really think we need to focus in on what do we want to achieve here. And if that's commercialization from Canada, work backwards from that. Because right now, we treat anyone who incorporates a business from Canada, their ability to do a research partnership with the Canadian university,
Okay, Mr.
regardless of
Desai, I
security
know I'm over
considerations.
time, so could you please present in
Thank you.
writing or submit in writing any other
Yes, thank you. Great
information?
suggestion and great questions. Thank you. Mr. Collins, you're up next for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the witnesses for their attendance today. Mr. Desai, I'll start with you. From an international perspective, we've heard from witnesses at other committee meetings some examples in terms of, in different areas of the world where there are policies and there are investments that are being made that may differ a little bit from the current ones that the Government of Canada offers. Fraunhofer comes to the top of the list. That one's been referenced many times. Your experience in terms of models that we could look at to look at policies and investments that are being made internationally, where we might be able to tweak our own policies and copy the same?
Yeah, I'd invite you to look at an organization called Inquitel. Again, I come with a bias of cybersecurity and software, so that's where I know it best. Inquitel represents the 21 U.S. intelligence agencies, everything from the CIA to military intelligence, defense intelligence, et cetera. They have a full gambit of tools to not only address the needs of the intelligence community from a technology perspective, but also to see technologies commercialized from the United States to the benefit of Americans. They even use it as a draw of foreign companies to come to the U.S. and make investments there and work with researchers on big technical challenges. I'd invite you to study their model because it goes right from IP companies or researchers right through to technologies that have dual use purposes that could solve one of their technical challenges, but also has a huge prosperity commercialization opportunity.
Thanks for that. I'll shift gears and now focus on the provinces. And so I think you said you're located obviously in the province of Ontario. You likely have some interaction with the province of Ontario, and we know that, I found in my early days here that, oftentimes we see governments working in silos, unfortunately. The provinces are doing their thing, the federal government's doing their thing, and sometimes there's some overlap, but oftentimes we don't see a lot of coordination and collaboration. And so your thoughts in terms of how the provinces and federal government should be working together in terms of ensuring that the investments we're collectively making are making a difference in your case, the tech sector?
Yeah, so I think alignment when you're trying to reach global markets and access big ideas to create net new things that the economy hasn't seen before and actually move the needle on GDP, because I believe that's the goal, does require alignment. I'm pleased to see it's happening in some sectors on the EV and the battery side. I would say that getting down into the details level on that, into the IP discussions is really important. Also, being focused not where the puck was, but where it's going, so that we can actually get ahead of sectors that frankly we're not just doing a Me Too with our American counterparts or European counterparts, but actually creating net new opportunities. And I don't just mean for technical researchers, for people to sell these products, for operations jobs, good high quality middle class jobs. That takes bets and it takes risk, and I think that risk could be better shared between the federal government, the provincial government, and companies. And I think companies is something government really struggles with. So I would say that in your question about alignment, you include companies as part of the team in those discussions.
Thank you for your answers. Ms. LaRose, can I ask you, obviously there's incredible policies that we see coming out of the province of Quebec. And I look at housing as for instance, childcare policies that go back decades. And we see the same in terms of innovation with IP and some of the policies from other witnesses that have been highlighted out of the province of Quebec. Can I ask you in terms of what the rest of Canada has to learn and other provinces might have to learn from the policies that have been established in your province?
C'est une bonne question.
That's a good question. The model for enhancement companies in Quebec is very interesting. The fact that we're regrouping in one entity people so we can have critical mass with respect to files and competency. It allows us to better manage IP. IP is federal. There is a federal act, but there are certainly things we can do in this respect to improve access to IP. And one thing I would say is that every university in Quebec and Canada has its own rules with respect to IP. So there's no harmonization, and that's one of the challenges. They're similar, but every university, some, for example, have ceded IP to private partners. Other universities would never want to do this. In the U.S., they never cede IP. Thank you.
And I wish we had more time, but we don't. Over Monsieur le Maire pour 2 minutes et demie.
You have 2.5 minutes, Mr. Lemire. Yes, the time issues is a serious one. I would like to have asked several questions when we're talking about funding. What measures in respect to copyrights should we have? Well, I'd like to thank my colleague Richard Cunning for looking at this, but I'd like to ask a question for our analysts to their benefit. Copyback, what concrete recommendations would you make to our committee to move forward the copyright issue? Also, in terms of the partners that you work with, the National Association of Book Editors, what would benefit them? Thank you. Today, we have to change the legislative framework to allow commercialization of copyright in Canada. Otherwise, it's impossible for rights holders to negotiate with educational establishments who are big content users. The Heritage Committee made a report with 22 recommendations. We're just asking for one to be implemented. There's an alternative commercial that could be used for a work. Universities should have to pay for this royalty. It's simple. There are teams that know these recommendations, but it takes some political will to move forward with legislative changes. If we don't make these legislative changes that have been waited for 10 years, such as a legal obligation, For me, there seems to be a lot of cynicism or a lack of confidence with respect to educational institutions. Obviously, the level of confidence is at its lowest. We're constantly struggling to get changes. Our revenues are melting, and some publishers are having to close their doors. We're becoming growingly impatient. We're not giving up. We want to go to the end with our partners to make the situation change in Canada, because it's becoming growingly intolerable. Your collective is one of these great strengths, but thank you very much for your efforts.
Thanks for 2.5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. And I'll turn to Mr. Desai. You're in cybersecurity, deal in software. We had a witness in our last meeting who brought up the issue around when you have a researcher or a company that wants to commercialize its IP, there's a decision that has to be made whether you patent it or whether you try to commercialize it through contracts and licenses. Because if you patent it, then you have to basically show the code. And I'm just wondering if maybe you could talk about that from your experience in your field.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a consideration. Patents are a tool within an IP strategy, but there are others, trade secret being a large one, and utilized in software. What I would say is sophisticated growth companies that are exporting globally have an IP strategy. And I think sometimes we use IP strategy and patent as synonymous, which they are not. There's some things that won't pass patents, and there's some things that frankly, data strategies coupled with high quality IP strategies actually might supersede a single patent. So I would say that the goal to me for younger companies than ours would be to have an IP strategy. Often a patent might be not accessible from a cost perspective, but understanding what you're working on and where the value resides today or could reside in the future is an imperative to ensure, especially our public investments. That concerns me when I see leakage, especially outside of Canada, on our vast public investments that end up outside the country. And then not just from a prosperity perspective, but there's some security considerations there. So thanks for the question.
And just quickly, Madame LaRose, if you could perhaps comment on that too, and perhaps this business of open research versus IP.
30 seconds.
Mais en fait, je pense que
I think that open research can also be protected. We have to be careful about how we define it, talking about collaborative research where IP is accessible to our partners. Well, with respect to IP that is free of royalties, there are not just patents. We have several successful cases of technological transfer. There have been copyrights or other forms of IP. So patents are not necessarily an end amongst themselves with respect to IP.
Thank you to all the witnesses that were here this morning. We'll now be suspending briefly while we set up our next panel. Great questions, great answers. The analysts have a job in front of them. Okay, on to the next panel, and welcome to our witnesses who are here in person, which is a delight to see. I don't have to tell you about Zoom or how to do all of that, but I could just mention that any questions that you have, if you can direct them through me, if you have any questions of the group, and for everybody to direct their comments and questions through the chair. And now I'd like to welcome both of our witnesses. As an individual, we have Todd Bailey, who is an intellectual property lawyer, and also from the Agri-Food Innovation Council, we have Serge B, Chief Executive Officer. So for the first presenter, Todd Bailey, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, honorable members, thank you very much for the invitation. Who am I? I'm a lawyer, a patent and trademark agent, and an engineer, and for the last 20 years I've been working on the business side of intellectual property in Canada. I've filed thousands of patents, and I've personally trained over 1,000 engineers, technologists, and business leaders about intellectual property. Today I'm the Chief IP Officer at the Scale AI Supercluster, where I've been involved with more than 100 Canadian AI projects. And it's all of these experiences that bring me here before you today. IP law is complicated, but as a tool of business, IP is not complicated. Canadian entrepreneurs, business people, and legislators all have incredible common sense and business judgment, and all of this knowledge is equally applicable to the world of intellectual property. For example, tonight some of us will go home and relax with our favorite streaming service, Netflix, Crave, or whatever. But what are you going to choose to watch? Will you choose the streaming service that has the most copyrights? Will you choose the show that is the most innovative, avant-garde show out there? Probably not, because we already know from our everyday experiences that IP and innovation alone do not make customer choice. To be successful, you need innovation that customers want. And then, to get the full commercial benefit, you need the right IP measures to support. Technology innovation and patents work exactly the same way. It's market-relevant innovation that's the driver. And IP plays a very important supporting role. What else do we already understand about commercializing innovation? Economics 101, supply and demand. Almost every witness to this committee has agreed on one thing. Although Canada's supply of innovation is pretty good, the industry demand is weak. You've heard that our university research is robust, but finding industry partners is hard. Our startup and VC community is one of the best outside of Silicon Valley, but they can't find the Canadian customers that's essential for scale-out. Commercialization is about stimulating demand. We can't start selling more unless Canadian companies start buying more. Scale AI's recent research report, AI at Scale, comes to the same conclusion in Canadian AI. But fostering innovation demand isn't just about supporting financial risk. And that's why Scale AI is connecting industry customers to academia and to startups. Because those connections foster demand, and they provide a customer focus to direct innovation. The Canadian Innovation Corporation could play a similar role for Canada. Turning to patents, what do we already know? Patents leverage the business value of innovation. And so that means patents sit at the intersection of innovation, IP law, and business. But what you might not know is that well over half of all patents miss their business target, which severely impacts their strategic value as an IP asset. The inventor and the legal professional working together cover the technology and legal angles, but more than half the time, there's no ongoing business guidance to direct the creation of that asset. So if we just increase Canada's patent output, we can expect a very high ongoing failure rate to meeting our IP goals. But reducing that failure rate by even a small amount will help Canada build a higher quality IP position versus our global peers. As a smaller country, Canada must work smarter. The last thing I quickly want to touch on is education. What does common sense tell us about education? What we teach and how we teach matters. If we want to build the next generation of chess grandmasters, is it enough to teach them how the pieces are made and the basic rules of the game? If IP is a business tool, then we need to open the door to market-specific business tactics on how IP builds competitive advantage. Developing champions and role models will also have a major impact. And I've seen this firsthand in my career. Teaching IP rules and generic strategies does not move the needle. But when I switched to having champions lead their peers, the effect was incredible. Crucially, we need to empower our entrepreneurs to see IP as a lever of business so that they can apply their wealth of business experience to how they use IP. And that's also how we get at that failure rate that I mentioned a moment ago. Again, I think the CIC has a role to play here. But to wrap up, I have 3 simple messages. Commercializing innovation needs demand, and demand needs relationships. We can supercharge Canadian IP by fostering business-relevant IP. And on education, what we teach and how we teach matters. Now, I didn't have time to get into artificial intelligence, but I'm happy to take questions, and thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey, for being right on time. Le prochain témoin.
Our next witness is Mr. We're not hearing the interpretation.
Of translation, if your mic is on.
My mic is on. It shows that it's on. It just came in. Ça vient d'arriver. So, as you're looking at how to support the commercialization of intellectual property, and with the fact that I'm not a lawyer, my comments will limit themselves to observation and policy options. At the end of my presentation, I will offer recommendations that I hope you will consider. The Agri-Food Innovation Council is an organization that advocates on behalf of agri-food research and innovation in Canada. Our history is long, going back to 1920, as we were founded by individuals that believed that research in agriculture would fuel Canada's economic growth. And indeed, at that time, they were correct. And they should be correct. They would be correct again today. So much innovation has taken place in Canada. Mr. Chair, you will remember the breeding and development of new asparagus varieties that have now become the most popular in North America and beyond, and that was done in your riding in Guelph, I believe. Mr. Tochar, which you're joining us, I believe, by Zoom, so much innovation is done in Saskatoon, and thanks to, in good part, to the incubators and organizations that exist, such as AgWest Bio, the Global Institute for Food Safety, etc. But more is done, and even more can be done. Our organization just had a meeting for 2 days in Ottawa with dozens of experts and stakeholders discussing how Canada's agri-food system can feed the world in a sustainable manner. And I can assure you that there were not only great ideas, but real, tangible projects that deliver results. There are so many ideas that percolated to the surface, including some that I'll mention today. Do we rank well in innovation? No. The fact is we rank poorly. 9th in terms of input, 23rd in terms of output. That should give you already a sense that there are some issues on there. The fact is that we are far below where we should be in terms of commercialization of innovation based on various indexes and reports from the OECD, Bloomberg, etc. Could we do better? Yes, absolutely. So let's look at what's holding us back. There's a cumbersome and burdensome regulatory process. And to be clear, and if the process is too cumbersome and too much of a burden, companies will look at innovation elsewhere, and they have already. You may have a great intellectual property protection regime, but if the regulations or the regulation guidance is delayed, nothing takes place, and we lose traction. A great example is the long-awaited Canadian Food Inspection Agency guidance on plant breeding innovation. The delays are concerning innovators and investors, especially when they see that the delays are being the result of non-scientific influential lobbies within certain parts of the government. But please don't take my word for it. If you use a recent Senate report which said that in terms of regulatory burden, Canada is one of the worst performing countries in the OECD, ranking 35th of 38 member countries. Is the regulatory burden unfair to SMEs? Absolutely. When you're looking at how cumbersome it is, SMEs can't compete with large companies who have millions and millions and teams of experts to deal with this. So it makes it much more difficult for them. And we can't be going on one side of our mouth, say, praise SMEs for fueling our economic growth, and on the other side say, oh, well, we'll put a regulatory burden which will make it very difficult for you to compete against large companies. So we do have to be careful on that. We need to protect our IP, and Canada has invested in the development of innovation. A multitude of funding programs, and I'll get back to that later, support the development of innovation, but commercializing innovation often means that selling the IP to a foreign company, and while Canadian taxpayers have invested in this, the benefits of this innovation often escape Canadians. Another issue to look at is how Canadian IP is protected. I understand that in the U.S., if there are sufficient grounds to believe that important products are fraudulently using American IP, they get seized at the border. In Canada, the government washes its hands and tells the company whose IP has been stolen to sue. I just talked to your company a few days ago. They invested they have a number of cases. They just invested $350,000 in one case alone of legal fees. And while I'm sure my colleague right beside with the legal community would be happy to hear that, I can tell you that companies are not happy to hear that. Supporting innovators. Incubators have played an important role to support innovators and especially to help them commercialize intellectual property. AIC supports the role played by incubators and believes that the government should continue to fund them. Their proximity to innovators builds credibility and confidence. Incubators have demonstrated time and time again that they deliver economic benefits to Canada.
Okay,
And then
I think we'll have to wind up on that. If you could maybe work your presentation into some of the answers that you give. I gave you a little bit more time because of the technical difficulties, but we will have to move into our first round with 6 minutes each, starting with Mr. Mr. Williams.
And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for our witnesses for joining us here in person today. Very important. Mr. Bailey, I think you've had some great examples you mentioned. I want to expand on a lot of what you talked about. So our failure to really commercialize our IP is a failure of ownership of IP in Canada. And I did like your example of Scale AI. I want to hear more about that. Specifically, we've had witnesses talk about Canada needs more IP collectives. So is Scale AI an IP collective? Is that something that we see as a good model? And how do we really see ownership come together with IP that's sitting out there too, and so we can see commercialization of IP in Canada?
So, am I on? Good. It's a great question. So patent collectives are about freedom to operate. And so to quickly answer the question, I think within the AI sector, I'll explain why there's already a pretty good freedom to operate, and there may not be a lot of benefits there. But so freedom to operate, if you think about yourself separated from a commercialization opportunity by a field that's full of landmines that are patents, essentially, okay? And you want to get across that field. And so you either need to navigate carefully between all of those potential dangers, or you need to clear a path, either by acquiring patents or knocking them out or whatever. So this is what freedom to operate is. In the AI sector, there's a bunch of reasons why that's, so not every, patents touch each industry differently, right? Like if you're in pharmaceuticals, they're going to be very upfront and personal, and at the other end of the spectrum in software and AI, it's different. But it's important to understand a few things about AI. First, AI is not a technology. It's sort of an idea, and it's actually a basket of a bunch of different kinds of math, essentially. Second thing to understand is that AI is really old. Like the people who invented it are all dead, and the people who came after them have really long white hair. So from a patent perspective, we patent things that are new, not things that are old. So that means there's a lot of stuff that's already out there available to be used without fear of patent rights. The third thing is to understand is that it's really hard to patent AI because it sort of falls in this funny space where the patent law says that you can't patent math and algorithms and stuff like that, and so it can be quite difficult. There's lots of patent applications being filed, but the failure rate on just getting those patents from application to granted patent is extremely high. So the point is that when you talk about a collective trying to create this freedom to operate corridor across a field, you have many different fields because there's so many different types of AI, and the patent population in that field is not at the same level as you might have somewhere else. But if you turn, for example, to something that's a burgeoning technology like quantum computing, which Canada is really sort of at the forefront, it's going to be very hardware focused. And this is a potential opportunity. I should back up quickly. I neglected to mention one really important thing about AI, and that is that the whole AI infrastructure is built on something called open source, which is software that's freely available to be used. I could open my laptop right now and with just a few lines of code create an AI that would parse, for example, all of the testimony of this committee and help generate some reflections and so on. So these open source creates large corridors of freedom to operate already. And when you have all that, the addition of a patent collective doesn't seem to offer much further benefit. But there may be some other areas that it does.
So you don't think collective idea is something that Canada needs to adopt, or at least with AI?
I'm saying to AI. I think if you looked at certain technologies, well, we have it in green technology already. I'm not that close to how well it's working. Quantum computing is going to be very hardware focused. It's going to be very technology focused. And an area where there will be lots of patents. There probably is already, and there may be opportunities there. I don't know.
When we look to who's doing it best with centralizing commercialization, obviously Germany with its Fraunhofer institutes, they're embedded with the universities. Do you see that as being something that Canada needs to replicate?
So the Fraunhofer Institute is an interesting idea. I'm really excited, actually, about the Canadian Innovation Corporation. I think that's an opportunity to centralize a lot of what we're doing. A lot will depend on how that thing actually gets off the ground and the kinds of people that are involved. I know that my friends over at the Council of Canadian Innovators have made a lot of noise about the kind of person that needs to be the CEO of that organization. I have certain opinions on what kind of intellectual property advice should be, coming out of that organization. But I think when you have a central organization that has the ability to reach out, it may have the opportunity to do some kinds of things like what Scale AI is doing.
The other big problem we have with Canadian IP is normally when we get the IP developed, we allow international companies, VCs from the U.S. to come in and just buy it. We even have the problem where Canadian companies will buy smaller companies who have started up and have something going. They seem to be bought up as well. How do we tackle that? How do we get around that?
So to me, it's a good problem to have, because if we're developing intellectual property that people want to buy, so we have something that, we're starting from a good place. We have to also, I think the goal of trying to get to more Canadian ownership is a good, solid goal. Where we are right now, my own research in the AI at Scale report that I've provided to our clerk to share with all of you, shows that we're sort of on par. We're not on par with the United States or China, but they're not our peers. We're on par with Israel. We're on par with France. We're ahead of most of the other G7 countries. So we're not starting from a bad place. We want to get better. But even now, where we have startups, let's say, being bought by American companies, there's money that's coming into Canada, and that money is coming into, as angel investors. You have entrepreneurs who now have, what they call a liquidity event, and they are becoming angel investors. I think we can do more to encourage that money. I mentioned about entrepreneurs and role models, and there's an opportunity. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Williams. Great set of questions. I worked in machine learning and machine intelligence, and my hair isn't that long. It might be white, but... and now we'll turn over for 6 minutes to Ms. Medlidge-Diab.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'm online. Welcome to our witnesses that are there in person. I'm usually there in person, but today I'm not. Mr. Bailey, I want to continue with one thing that you brought up, and that's the Canadian Innovation Corporation. How can we use that corporation to support Canadian business investment in research and development and foster economic growth? Clearly, you have some ideas on that. You've been in the field for a while. What suggestions would you have for us?
So the first suggestion, and I think this came up with in the last session with one of the previous witnesses, is how do we connect our researchers and our startups with the customers, the Canadian industry that actually can use that, and I mentioned in my comments, it's not just about financial support. It's not like there's a bunch of companies on the sidelines here that are just saying, well, it's a little bit too expensive, I'm not going to do it. They, at least in my experience, they honestly don't know where to start. They don't know who's in their field. They don't know who has the expertise that they need. And so What Scale AI is doing, and I think it's on a much smaller scale, but I see this the CIC being able to do this on a national scale, is that Scale AI has the expertise of which researchers are working in which area, which startups are doing which kind of work, so that when companies come to us and say, we want to do AI, we want to, where do we start? Who should I talk to? Or they come and say, I have this plan, and our business experts look at the plan and say, this is a plan that's set to fail. And when you have companies that are doing innovation for the first time, you do not want them to fail. You want them to succeed. So they start small and they grow bigger. So the CIC, if it becomes this sort of central clearinghouse for government funding, which I'm not in the front lines of how the CIC is being, but that's one of the ideas being floated, that SIF and all these others will be brought under one umbrella. Then you have an opportunity to be developing expertise in different areas and playing this matchmaking role, because one of the honorable members mentioned earlier that it is really about matchmaking. It's about finding the right resources and supporting them.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. You talked a lot about market relevance, innovation, supply and demand, and connecting, I guess, this interrelationship between the different players. I got another question for you on education, but also on connection. Where do you see the different levels of government playing here versus the educational institutions themselves, universities and colleges, versus private business?
So the reason that I think that the CIC has a role to play in education is because right now, Elevate IP is a federal government program that is supporting the education of intellectual property. But, to my perspective, there's not really any sort of driver on content. And so each organization is and maybe, each teacher is left to teach what they think is relevant. And, there is this whole business piece of it. If you think about it, like all of business has a legal framework to it, right? Banking, real estate, you name it. But there's no other area of business where we sort of, we ask the lawyers to do so much, right? Without, contact with the sort of the business pieces of it. If I wanted to become a real estate tycoon, I probably am not going to my real estate lawyer to ask for advice, right? So the CIC role can be sort of as, setting a curriculum, trying to drive, train the trainer type things and that sort of thing. You asked about coordination between government. I think one of the things government can do best is try not to step on each other's toes. One thing that we've tried to do at Scale AI is not duplicate what other organizations are already doing in the AI sector, because duplication, is duplication.
So our committee is sort of a science and research committee, to focus on scientists, researchers, early scientists. What can we do better to help those researchers on the ground with this field here? Or what can businesses do? Or what can you folks do?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that we can do is give researchers and Canadian institutions Canadian customers to work for. We know that funding in education and funding in research is always in short supply. And sometimes, you have to, find a corporate partner, and you don't have the luxury of deciding where that corporate partner comes from. But if we can, for innovation to really have relevance, it needs a customer demand. So when you're innovating in a vacuum, when you're innovating in a dark room, there's some areas, like if you're in medical innovation, that if you can kill that kind of cell, you're going to have something here. But for most areas of technology, and especially if you're talking about AI or anything digital, there's ultimately a customer. And so, if by helping industry find the universities, find the colleges, find our startups, you're giving them an ability to innovate on something that people want to buy.
So thank you very much, Mr. Bailey. Do I have any time, Mr. Chair?
No, you've got about 10 seconds.
Okay, well, listen, thank you very much to our witnesses, and Mr. Bai, hopefully the next witness will get to you.
Great, thank you very much.
Or the next
Monsieur Lemire,
pour
6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes. As discussed previously, allow me to say that during the committee meeting, my colleague made 2 requests to the department to provide the amount of funding of grants in English and French for the past 20 years, and also with respect to the amount of scholarships granted by the 3 research granting agencies by university for the last 20 years. And we had to ask the ministry once again for the missing information. A second answer was transmitted to the committee on Monday. Unfortunately, we still do not have a full answer. The following data is still missing with respect to number of grants in English and French per establishment over the past 20 years, and the amount of grants by establishment for the past 20 years. Also, the committee stopped writing the report in French, awaiting these data. Therefore, we need to get it quickly. And you received a notice of motion from Mr. Maxime Blanchette-Jonca on April 25th that the committee asked the Ministry of Information to provide the missing information relative to the question asked by Mr. Blanchette-Jonca to the Minister of Innovation during the SRSR committee of February 2nd, 2023, and then due before May 4th, 11 a.m. So they want the amount of scholarships granted by the 3 research granting agencies by university for the last 20 years. Thank you, Chair.
The motion that we had a notice of in the last meeting. Would we like to adopt this motion, or would we like to, is there any debate on it?
J'inviterais à l'adopter, Monsieur le Président.
Okay. I see we've got, if we have unanimous consent, we can just accept the motion, and it looks like we have unanimous consent. So congratulations, and we will work on that and discuss it at our pre-committee our subcommittee next week.
It's very important. We know how much research in France is under threat. So I go back to the topic. Mr. Bailey, I'll start with you. You mentioned the issue of AI, and I'd be curious to ask you a question with respect to Bill C-27 that I imagine you've been following with somewhat interest, given it's at committee stage. What do you think of this legislation? Perhaps you could also talk about the commercialization of IP in your answer, which seems to be related to this legislation.
It's a great question. As you may know, and I'm sure you do, a lot of the interesting stuff that's to come on Bill C-27 is still to come. It will be in the regulations. The Act itself sets out the regulation of so-called high-impact AI. The AI is already regulated by, we're hearing a lot about AI now because of ChatGPT, and it's really cool, but it's not new technology. It's old technology. It's just massive, massive, massive scale, right? But we've had AI in our hands for 10 years already. The approach that's being taken, I think, is a good one because AI changes quickly. 6 months ago, we didn't know what ChatGPT was. And then it's here, and it's changing a lot of things. So if you were to put in your law, these sorts of, it would take a long time to keep current, and you would always be, chasing the technology. By at least having the regulations address the rules and some of that thing, the government has allowed itself to, or the law allows itself to keep pace. Okay. So I think that's quite important. It's also important to understand that most AI is not high-impact AI, right? So if you look at what Scale AI is doing relating to supply chain, and it's essentially productivity tools. And so go ahead.
We have a minute left.
Je vous remercie de votre réponse, si vous me permettez.
Thank you for your answer. I would like to give your name to witness, to appear as a witness at the Industry Committee as well.
Merci.
First, thank you for your work on the agri-food industry. We know the situation could be high risk in Quebec and Canada. How do you evaluate our ability to respond to health crises? Can we produce vaccines in Quebec and Canada that will meet the needs of your sector? I do not think that we do have the ability to produce all the vaccines that will be needed in Canada. We may be able to produce some. Right now in Canada, we can meet our needs currently, but there is an enormous risk. Answer, yes, we are taking a risk, one that is measured, but I agree with you. Thank you. I'll go back next round to you.
Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. I'll continue with agri-food. And my father worked at a Canada Agriculture Federal Research Station throughout his career, and so he was always bringing home new, innovative apple chips and things like that, and stories of friends of ours who were developing new cherry varieties, Dr. Lappins and people like that. I'm just wondering how the federal government, through those research stations across the country, and I know they've declined, or at least in number over the years, but how those federal research stations handle IP.
Well, it is a challenge. I mean, ultimately, the federal government shouldn't be in charge of commercialization of IP, right? So it should help the research and researchers, but ultimately hand it at one point to the private sector to move ahead. The federal government has done great work and continues to do great work in its research stations. We've advocated for the maintenance of funding for the research stations throughout the country. They've done a great work. The handling of the IP is a little bit more difficult because of the nature of the industry, and they definitely have had challenges.
So you mentioned new asparagus varieties, and I mentioned cherry varieties because most of the cherries grown in the world today were developed in the Summerland Research Station in British Columbia. And I know some of the most popular ones, I think, went out into the world without any patent protection or whatever, because that was kind of a new thing back in the 80s and 90s when they were developed, and now that has changed. So when I look, it seems that the newer varieties do have some protection, and there are companies set up adjacent to those stations to handle that. Is that a continuing trend now, or is it?
It absolutely is. I think there is much more of a continuum now where the private sector is able to move in and support the protection of IP. But ultimately, my colleague at the table talked about, it's not a bad thing if IP gets bought, and I fully agree, as long as the benefits go back to Canadians, right? And when we see producers that look at some IP that gets bought by international companies, and the product of the research is no longer available to them because suddenly it moves south of the border, I think there is concerns on that front. And that probably should be a little bit better protected to make sure that when Canadian taxpayers' dollars are used, there is some benefits to Canada in general. I'm not opposed to small company selling their IP to a larger company. I'm in favor of better protection for IP developed by Canadian, thanks to Canadian taxpayers' dollars.
And if I have some time left, I'd just like to offer you, I think you were going to have some recommendations. I don't know whether you've gotten to them all, but if you can
I haven't, so thank you for that. I mean, a couple of things. And what I will do is I'll send a list to the committee later on. But there's a couple of things. We've talked about funding, and there has been discussions about funding. And a new corporation that's developed, that's great. In the agri-food research and innovation sector, there are 22 government departments and agencies that deal with funding. of research and innovation. That's just in the agri-food sector, right? There's little to no coordination in between all of them. We've asked whether or not the government knows how much money it is spending to support agri-food research and innovation, and the answer is we don't know. We used to know a number of years ago, but we don't know anymore right now. The measure of success shouldn't be the number of government funding programs, but rather what are the outputs and the measurable outputs. So one of our recommendations to undertake a review of Canada's funding program ecosystem and find efficiencies. Find strong efficiencies, potentially merge some of the programs and bring them under some coordination. And I'm not saying anything new. Dominic Barton, in his report a number of years ago that was asked by the federal government, did say exactly that. There should be better coordination in that sector. And we should also invest in evaluation services. It's not sufficient for a company to say, I received X amount of money from the federal government and I've created so many jobs and so many amount to the GDP, contributed so much to the GDP. Let's verify that information to make sure we look at the funding programs in a good way and ensure we're making good decisions. So those are some of the recommendations. There is a few more, including, if I've got one more second, the support of Canadian innovation by standing by Canadian innovation. So the agri-food sector is a little bit different, a little bit like pharma. Our products end up in consumers' mouth at one point, directly or indirectly, right? And others. So there's a lot of regulation, a lot of things, a lot of hoops to go through. Once we've gone through all those hoops, mandated by the government, it is on occasion frustrating for the government not to support not the claims, but support the science that's been developed on that front. Right? We have a Canadian science, the chief science advisor. Let's get a better mandate and broader mandate to support the science developed in Canada. I'll stop there. I see Mr. Chair moving.
That's great. Thank you for getting all that on the record, and Mr. Cannings for making sure that happened. We're going to be moving into our 5-minute rounds, starting with Mr. Mazier.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the witnesses for being here today. Mr. B, we haven't heard much from agriculture here, so I'm really happy you're here today to have part of the study. And agriculture tends to be forgotten, but this agriculture does participate a lot in science and research, so I really do appreciate you being here. I want to touch back on to what you asked the government and whether they monitor the amount of money they invest in agriculture in the programs. And they got back to you and they said, no, we don't monitor it?
They said they used to have that information. To be clear, I asked the question, do you know how much money in total you're spending on agri-food research and innovation? And the answer was, we used to have that information, we don't have it anymore.
Can you provide that documentation to this committee?
I provide a statement. It was said verbally.
Okay. So is that a little bit concerning?
Oh, to me, it's very concerning. To the sector, it is very concerning as well. But it speaks to a broader issue, sir. It speaks to the fact that there is no coordination. You have a multiplicity of programs, and people are creating new programs and more programs, and that seems to be the value of success. The measure of success. And we're saying, let's not use the measure of success, the development of new programs, and how many people are hired to administer those programs. Let's look at efficiencies, right? And before we move on IP, new rules for IP or changes on that, let's look at the ecosystem generally and look at how we can better support the sector on our side.
And I can't imagine these delays would just frustrate the heck out of everybody, especially in agriculture when we've got only a certain amount of time to do these kind of things or someone else is going to come in. You did mention in your remarks, too, about the CFIA and that whole review process, the delays on that. I didn't know if you wanted to expand on that, because I've been following that for years, and I know it's how would you explain to a science committee how important that is to get that project done by this government?
Well, it is crucial. It is going to enable producers to have significant improvements on their farms, and so we've invested in research. We've gone through I don't know how many regulatory hoops and legislation got brought in, regulation got brought in. Everybody said, okay, finally we're there. And then suddenly, nope, no, there is you have to wait for guidance, and guidance is being developed, but being developed in consultations and discussions with a number of groups, some of them with no scientific background that are opposing some of those changes, and suddenly everything grinds to a halt, which means all the innovation that was developed grinds to a halt and moves forward. And when you look at innovators, and companies, they're going to look at the system. Okay, is Canada a stable country for innovation, or is Canada being swayed by lobby group A, B, or C? Do we need to move somewhere else where science is going to be leading the charge on this? And I think science should lead the charge on this.
How many years have you been struggling with this particular case? Has it been 4?
I don't have the exact amount, but I can tell you way too long. I think it's 4 or 5, maybe.
Maybe 7, 8?
Maybe.
Okay. Mr. Bailey, I asked the University of Saskatchewan for their patent income in comparison to the federal research funding they received. Their written response says that over the last 5 years, total federal research expenditures were over $418 million. Total license income received was $51 million. That's a loss of 88%. Why should Canadians be okay with such a significant losses?
So I'm not familiar at all with what the University of Saskatchewan is doing. I can tell you that innovation is an expensive business because we're not anywhere near, and no one is anywhere near 100% effectivity rate on developing innovation. But one of the things that I brought forward is that you can innovate in a vacuum, or you can innovate to customer demand, right? And universities are these sort of hybrid sort of type places. They're a place of academia, but they're also engaging with industry. And so not being from that community, I can't speak to it directly, but it seems to me there's probably a tension there between, wanting to do the research that academia is leading you to, and then being told, well, you need to file patents or whatever it is that they're being told, to the flip side, and you look at sort of more engineering-based type research that's being done, that's probably being, done with more of a market focus in mind.
Great. Thank you. Over to Mr. Lauzon for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today. I'll start with Mr. Bouy. You kind of sparked my curiosity. You spoke during your intervention with respect to challenges for entrants. We created a program for agriculture, climate change that has had impact on entrants. I'd like to hear what you have to say in terms of developing programs like this one. And we implemented a second stream in 2022. Talk about the benefits for IP for farmers to reduce climate change and all the action in this respect. Thank you. I cannot say that it's not a good program. I was just saying that it has an objective, and it is a good one to reach. Yes, it's a good thing. But I'll go back to my point with respect to the many programs that are growing and the sector's concern it seems to be very dispersed. And another thing I wanted to say, that if you create a program like this, it's one thing, but how can innovation be adopted on farms afterward? That's another more in-depth question. Do we have the ability to implement it and to develop it and make sure that farmers are able to adopt this innovation? At another committee a few weeks ago, I presented about the carbon tax, and one of the members in your side said there is innovation that allows us to use alternative alternatives to fuel and gas, and the answer was, well, there are none exactly that can be used everywhere. This is a very serious committee we have before us today, and you're saying that the coordination of this IP throughout these 20 organizations that don't seem organized, that you don't have the figures, but these are verbal comments you've heard. And here we're asking for concrete figures on the table with technical data. Are you saying that these programs, for example, the program we just spoke about, wouldn't have scientific data to move IP forward? No, I think you understood me incorrectly, Mr. Lauzon. What I'm saying is that when we asked the government, a representative, an official, a high-ranking official, if they had data to say how much the government is spending on R&D programs in agri-food, they said, no, we don't have it now. We had it in the past, but we no longer have it. Perhaps he didn't have it when you asked for it, because we have to be able. Can we come back with an answer? Oh, look, the question wasn't in terms of the timing, but rather the answer was given to say that we no longer have these measures in place. Mr. Bailey, I'd like to ask you a question now. You spoke about patents that don't obtain their objectives. In terms of your experience as a lawyer, you have thousands of patents that are sometimes excluded left and right. And you also spoke about ways we can improve the system. Can you talk about these objectives? As a government, how could we improve the future of what's lost in our system and to recover it and improve it, enhance it? Two and a half minutes, Mr. Lemire.
Thank you. If you can, for either witness, if there's more information you can provide in writing, that would be helpful for the analysts.
It is important for this committee.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll start the clock now on Mr. the Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bouy, how can universities play an important role in commercialization? For example, the University of Quebec in Témiscamingue has an agri-food research center in the north. It's working to improve Nordic agricultural practices. How can we make sure that innovation and research produces this new knowledge and commercializes it? I'd like to hear what you have to say about targeted amounts of funding for in agri-food. Well, is it enough to promote innovation? I'll answer you in two ways. You're asking if the work done by universities is important. I would say it's crucial. They do excellent work in terms of research and innovation in the agri-food sector. We support the requests that they make for funding for research infrastructure. In that respect, it's really important. With respect to capacity for commercialization, that's something else. Canadian-wide and in Quebec, there is no coordination in terms of how companies can work with universities with respect to IP. It would be good to have some coordination in that respect. It's always funding. We could always have more of it. But as members, it's up to you to decide where this funding should go. But most of the time, it's a question of whether we could use the money more efficiently in the agri-food sector. So that's why if we had coordination, it would improve it. Yes, I like your answer. We have to have this in terms of agri-food resilience. But how can we ensure knowledge transfer in Quebec and Canadian universities? It means we have to research in agri-food companies and export our research. How can we support this knowledge transfer? By supporting incubators and organizations that support links between universities, research centers, entrepreneurs, farmers. There's excellent work that's being done by these incubators, and it would be really important to support them, better funding for incubators. That would be my answer. Thank you.
For 2.5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. And I'm just going to turn to Mr. Bailey. And, we're here to find out what, in a broad sense, what the Canadian government could do to help the innovative sector, help guide IP policy. And you've mentioned the Canadian Innovation Corporation a couple of times, and perhaps maybe if you could just tell us, if you were in charge of that corporation, or at least the IP part of it, what would your priorities be in terms of helping Canadian innovators and corporations improve our record in this regard?
Thank you for the question. I think, I'll be repeating myself, but I will be happy to do that, is that, patents are a tool of business. And what I see the role of CIC is, and I don't know exactly what they will be mandated to do, but if you have a sort of cross-government, cross-funding what you have an opportunity is to sort of level set the playing field in terms of across Canada to get these messages out that IP is not just about the legal protection, it's not about the technology, it's actually about the business piece. And, every patent agent and every patent lawyer knows that, but it's not their job to go and do that. So they will tell their client, you need to be concerned about these things. But the client ultimately, has to manage things like their focus on the technology. They have to pay the bills at the end of the day. So you want to get those messages out, and then you also want to be able to facilitate finding that kind of business advice so that entrepreneurs don't just call up and say, you need to go get an IP strategy, but here is someone or here is some expertise relevant to your field that will help you sort of see yourself in that future state.
I'll just leave it there.
We have a few minutes. We have 4 minutes left, so time for one question, up to 2 minutes for Mr. Williams, and then we'll go to the Liberals.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So following up on my questions earlier on Mr. Bailey on AI, China has, I think last year alone, they filed 14,000 patents in AI. That was more than Canada filed as a whole for all of our patents, I believe. What significance does that have on capital access to markets comparing to Canadians, and what kind of system can we create that rewards commercialization? And I know that the difficulty you talked about before, but in getting a little bit ahead of that, competing with that.
So I did mention that there is a huge attrition rate between patent filing and patent grant for AI because it sits in this special place. You have to also understand that if we're talking about patent filings in China, the Chinese government pays researchers to file patents, but those researchers don't get any more money after that first check, so those patents all end up on the cutting room floor for the most part. There's a lot of research, including Canadian research, that shows that it's a fraction of a % of those patent applications that actually turn into patents outside of China, okay? All of that, and then I also mentioned that every sector is not the same. So just because you have a patent, not all patents are worth the same. They're not like money, right? So I can go get a patent for my shoe probably, but I'm not going to be able to really enforce that against anyone because shoes have been around for quite some time. And that's not a condemnation of the patent process. There's probably something that I can put on my shoe that's quite unique and get a patent for it. But all patents are not the same. But we need to, and then, we had a witness in the last section that said, for software and AI, patents are not always the best route, right? We have to get out of the mode of always thinking that patents are at the pinnacle. So all of that is to say is that, there is a lot of intellectual property, especially in AI, that's being commercialized, being protected, but not through the patent route, because that's not always the best route.
Great. Super. Thank you. Mr. Lauzon.
Merci de l'occasion, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. April 15th, Mr. Bailey participated at an international summit in Montreal on AI, and he clearly said that it's really important to take action now on Bill C-27. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. Includes Privacy Act protection and the protection of AI, in your opinion. Well, the action that we're taking with C-27, does it show that, well, the action we'll be taking, will it also encourage the U.S. to work in the same direction we are?
It is not by itself in the world. It has to deal with other parties out there. Across the pond, you have Europe, which takes a very heavy approach to regulation. They're usually leading the pack, and they have been on AI as well. And to the south, we have a country that, in the United States, that does not do a lot of regulation. Now, as a country, Canada wants to do business in both jurisdictions, and so we have to walk a line. So I haven't not been involved in any of the consultations relating, but this is just sort of my perspective. So we have to walk a line, and this is what I see is in Bill C-27 in Part 3, the AI and Data Act part, is trying to create a framework that will be helpful for Canadian companies that want to go do business in Europe, and also not discourage our interactions with the United States in terms of AI, because we have to accept that the big players in all digital space are mostly American companies, and we don't want to cut ourselves off from that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good to get that nuance.
One more question, please. No. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to the witnesses for providing great answers and getting some of the nuances on the table for us to be considering. Next Tuesday, May 2nd, the subcommittee will be meeting from 11 o'clock until 11:50, and then the main committee will meet in camera from noon until 1 to begin reviewing the draft report on international moonshot programs. Notices of these meetings have been published. Do we have an agreement to adjourn? It looks like we do. Thank you again for all the witnesses and to the members for great questions.
Merci aux